one of the things that I am going to touch on is the worker strike back. Now, what is workers strike back? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a clip, and we're going to listen to Kshama Sawant herself talk about workers strike back. And we're going to speak with Sabby herself, because Sabby had on Kshama Sawant herself. And some of you already may have seen this, but some of you may have not. Some of you are viewers of Sabby, and some of you
surprise guest.
But it started playing. But this is actually Kshama Sawant's explanation of what worker strike back is. I'm also going to go into the website and give you guys a little bit of what it is and why it's so important. And I'm going to show you guys what could be regards to worker strike back here in the United States. So we're going to go into this. Shout out to Sabby. If you're watching, shout out to you, sis. All right, let's go.
Tonight, surprise. Hello, Kshama. Welcome back.
Hi, Sabby. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming back. So for those of you who are not aware, my guest tonight is Kshama Sawant. She is the city councilor of Seattle. She's also an activist. She's been on here before. And so originally, Kshama, I was already set to do a story about your response to AOC, about how she has pretty much like abandoned the workers. And I'll still show parts of that while you're here during your interview. But then I saw there's an announcement that came out about you. So I want to share this headline with everyone. Now, at first, when I saw the headline and it said Sawant won't seek re-election, I got a little nervous, but then I continued to read and it says plans to launch national labor movement. So
okay, so first off, when I saw that she wouldn't seek re-election, my heart almost stopped. I said, "What, Sister Kshama? No, baby, don't do that. Don't do that. We need you, sis." But then she was like, "Don't worry, y'all. We're doing an organization to get workers mobilized." I'm like, oh, okay. I'll pick up what you're throwing down. By the way, I got to reach out to her to see if she can come back on. I've had her on before. By the way, I've talked to Kshama on this channel before. If you guys want to, you guys can go into the interviews playlist and you guys can see my interview with Kshama on there. But I'm going to try to have her back on to talk about this. But yeah, I was like, no, don't do that. But then she did something else. I'm like, oh, it's kind of like, okay. It's kind of like when somebody is going to make your favorite meal. You've had it a few times, but it's still your favorite meal, right? But then they whip out something that's also your favorite that you haven't had in a while. You're like, okay. All right. So yeah, that's basically what it kind of felt like. Anyway, let's get back.
Kshama is here tonight. Please tell us so much about this.
First of all, yeah, thanks for covering this, Sabby. I think this is extremely important. And as the headline suggests, and as the op-ed that I wrote in a local newspaper, The Stranger, which I hope your viewers are able to check it out, what we're saying is that the way we have used our office, our Socialist City Council office, for now almost a decade. When I leave this office in December, it will be a full decade that I will have been in office. We have won 4 elections, and we have won incredible victories, like making Seattle the first major city to win a $15 an hour minimum wage. We won the Amazon tax, taxing big corporations to fund affordable housing and Green New Deal programs. And we have won a whole host of unprecedented renters' rights victories. And we have done all this only because we adopted a fighting and movement building strategy for our office, unlike the well-meaning maybe, but ultimately go along to get along politics that you see even, unfortunately, from the squad, the Democratic Party establishment. And and we want this message that when we fight we can win, and also there is no way to win without fighting. That message, we want that to be shared nationally, and that is why we feel that and when I say we, I mean Socialist Alternative. As you know, we are a democratic organization. Our members discussed this, and we collectively decided that it's important for us to launch a national campaign and really a movement. And as we've said, it's Workers Strike Back. And I just wanted to clarify, I don't know, some of the headlines call this a new labor movement. I want to be very clear. We're not here to replace the labor movement. What we are here to do is share our message about a fighting strategy and the need for rank and file members of the union movement, and also non-unionized workers, young people who want to fight against the climate catastrophe, to defeat big business, to win Medicare for all. How do we win all this? It is through this kind of strategy, and we want Workers Strike Back to empower working people nationally, including in Seattle. And so that's why we're going to have a launch of Workers Strike Back in many cities across the nation on March 4th. And I really urge everybody to sign the petition if you go to workersstrikeback.org.
First of all, look at Sabby's face. You see that smile? You knew exactly you knew exactly how she was feeling at that moment. She was like, now sis, this is some good stuff. You see what I mean? That's I'm kind of feeling the same way, and it's it's rubbing off of me. But the thing is that one of the things I like that she actually said was that this doesn't replace the labor movement. This just adds to the labor movement, basically. And so this is also what's really important. And so I really appreciate this, because the problem is that those of us who are part of the proletariat, and by proletariat we mean workers, right? Because there's a lot of people who may be coming new to the political scene and they may not know what words like proletariat means. Basically, it's workers and worker adjacent, meaning those of us who may be, like, for instance, I'm disabled, so I'm on disability, but I may not be able to work. Or you have the poor, the homeless, people like that. So when it comes to the proletariat, aka workers or working adjacent or the poor people, we need to unite and have solidarity, or meaning a unified front in order to combat what I like to call a corporate dictatorship. And that's what this is about. Fighting a corporate dictatorship, not writing a strongly worded letter, not bubbling a couple of boxes and putting a couple people in Congress so that they will just be co-opted by the corporate dictatorship into doing what they want, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. But it's really about actually fighting them, right? You lose 100% of the shots you don't take. Now, the thing is being a part of this movement, we realize that, number one, you cannot end capitalism or end the influences that make capitalism so grotesque, because it is a grotesque system. You cannot get rid of it through capitalist organizations like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. You cannot do it. It's absolutely unnecessary. Because the thing is like, that's like trying to get rid of the capitalist system through a capitalist party is like trying to empty out the ocean by pouring the water that you lifted up in the bucket and pouring it back into the ocean. It doesn't make sense. And so we have to get ourselves to a point where we literally put them up to a fight. And I'm going to show you guys what that fight could potentially look like in a second. But this is one of the things I appreciate is that, and even Kwame Ture has said, and I played this on RBN on Sunday, but Kwame Ture said that every single leader in a revolutionary movement, every revolutionary leader has belonged to an organization, and that organization is integral to, it is an important piece in order to change things for the workers and the poor. Because we can sit here and go, oh, we just need to vote more people in, and then just leave it at that. But guess what? If they already have control of that apparatus, what good is it going to do if we keep adding to that apparatus if nothing's going to work? So we're talking about going into a different direction, right? We're going into the direction that actually worked. We're going into that direction that actually threatened the powers that be, not acquiesce to the powers that be. And so that's something that I wanted to talk about. Just a little bit more.
Awesome, Kshama. Now, this comes about at a perfect time because I did see that a lot of us did see this video, a viral video from AOC where she was.
Okay. But yeah, so that's her explanation as to what it is, right? And there was a launch that happened at Worker Strike Back over the weekend. It was in Seattle, Washington on Saturday, and Nick from RBN was there. So I actually want to show Nick's speech, at least a little bit of it, because I think that's also going to be very important. Because once we, because a lot of us at RBN really think that this is something that is deeply important to focus, on the workers. Let me see. And I'm going to play the short because it is a little bit difficult to hear because of the reverb in the room. But this is something that is deeply important. So let's go.
In a capitalist dictatorship, we must reject that. Now, I want you guys to understand that everyone has a role in this movement. The RBN is here to empower people. I mean, militant class solidarity in love for our fellow workers. We must have an undying love for workers. Because you know what we love? Capitalists love them, but they want us to fight. I'm done. We need militant class solidarity. It's time for workers to strike back. There's been an active effort by the establishment to disempower you. We make you believe in a hero to the state. That's not going to happen. We save ourselves. We have to organize. We're not a hero. We live in a capitalist dictatorship.
So the thing that I think is important for us to understand and what Nick was saying is that your love for the fellow workers actually has to take precedent. And because of that, that's what will be the motivating factor, because we're sick and tired of seeing our fellow workers as well. And by fellow workers, I'm not just talking about people that are close to us, right? Your fellow people that are out there on the streets, whether you come at it from a spiritual position or a secular position, you either way, that person that's out on the street, that's your relative. That person that is sleeping in that hotel room because they can't afford to actually live in an actual home, that's your relative. That person that does not have adequate health care, that's your relative. That person that's actually being propagandized, that's being brainwashed by the system in order to think that people like you are the problem, that's also your relative. And what do we need to do? Wake them up. That's the thing that we have to do, is wake them up, because once they wake up, this is why being woke is actually important, because when you wake them up, then they realize, oh snap. Because here's the thing, people who consider themselves to be conservative actually want to be woke. They just don't call it that. They may call it red pill, or they may call it, oh, I'm awake from living in the matrix. But the thing is, they also want to be woke too. The thing is that they think they're looking at it from the perverted version that the liberals in the Democratic Party have given it. And so this is why it's important for a class solidarity, so that they realize, hey, oh snap, these people, they're victims just like me. They're being fought against just like me. Why am I being a pawn of this corporate dictatorship? Why am I simping for these guys? That's the important point. And I think that's something that, you know, coming together on issues that really would help us is important. And this is why a worker-centered organization is so important, right? Kshama Sawant also had a speech, and I'm going to show her speech really quick too. I'm going to show a small excerpt from her speech. Her speech was around 20 minutes, and so I don't have the time to show the entire speech. But I think that's also important as well. So let's share the screen. I'm not going to bother you guys with all my singing, because I don't want to make your ears bleed. Okay. Let me stop. All right. Take it away, Kshama.
Working people are facing an all-out assault on our living standards. The cost of everything is soaring through the roof. At the same time, we face the existential threats of war and environmental catastrophe. Meanwhile, billionaires and bosses are making historic profits off our backs. The horrors of the boss system are on full display in the working class town of East Palestine, Ohio.
So she's basically talking about the horrors of capitalism being seen in East Palestine, which is basically true. I mean, if you look at what's going on there, I mean, really, it's all about the executives and the shareholders of Norfolk Southern getting as much money and extracting it out of the workers as possible in order to stuff and line their pockets. So that really basically all it is. They do not want the workers to actually have protections and a good work-life balance in order for them to do their jobs. What really it's about is just trying to extract as much money from them, so then they just make as much as they possibly can. I'd agree. And in doing so, they've cut they've cut measures that would make things safer, safety measures. And so because they cut those measures, then you have train derailments like what happened in East Palestine. And then guess what happens? People get sick. They potentially die. And so this is what's going on. And so because of that, workers get shafted once again. Any wonder why we're against this system? And you can call it corporatism, you can call it cronyism, but really, let's call it what it is. What it is. It's called capitalism, and that's what it is. And it's basically wanting to extract as much resources without giving as much back to the workers, so then you can line your pockets, even though you already are working on your third yacht. That's what it is. And then, guess what? People will suffer and die. But you don't care because you're playing bowling in your own house. You got bowling balls to buy. You got a new lane to install. See what I mean? So, yeah, let's finish.
But one of the worst chemical disasters in American history is playing out after the derailment and explosion of a train owned by Norfolk Southern Corporation. This apocalyptic scenario lies at the door of Norfolk Southern's executives and their major shareholders, billionaire plunderers from so-called financial asset management companies like BlackRock and Vanguard. What is unfolding in East Palestine was an entirely predictable consequence of sacrificing basic safety in service of an endless thirst for profits by the rich. Paid sick leave, urgent railroad safety measures, and an end to dangerously low staffing levels were key demands of the 125,000 unionized rank-and-file freight railroad workers who were in pitched battle late last year against their billionaire bosses.
So basically, the railroad workers, they actually wanted more safety measures in place to prevent things like this happening. But because the safety measures would cost them more money, Norfolk Southern, the people at the top, basically did not want to do it because they didn't want to spend that more money, because that means they would have less money for their yachts. And so because they had, they wanted more money for their yachts, then people suffer and die. All because they can sit there in their yachts and eat caviar while screwing over people like you. So that's what it is. And that's one of the things that Kshama is actually talking about in her speech. And I know it's kind of hard because of the reverb, but this is also a very important piece in order to point out, because a lot of times people who may not be so privy to the lingo that some of us leftists are used to, what the thing is that these corporatists, these people, these super rich people are not wanting to keep us safe. They don't want us to be safe when we do our jobs that essentially make them money, because they want to take more from us instead of us actually having a better relationship. And that's the problem with this system, is that they own it and they want more perpetual growth. They want infinite growth. And so because of that, that means that you have less safe workplace and they make more money. Because even if they get a fine for doing the horrible things that they do, which causes catastrophes like this, is actually less money to pay the fine and shaft workers like you than it is to actually pay the workers a living wage, make sure there's enough workers in order to do the job properly, and make sure there are enough safety protections in place so that catastrophes like this don't happen. That's the problem with them. And so because of that, this is why we're in this situation in the first place. Because it's unmitigated greed. You have a system that exacerbates the greed within these people, instead of having a system that depresses the greed in favor of everyone, so that we all can have an equal, equitable, and egalitarian society. So let's continue.
Raising alarms about the dire working conditions on the tracks, including the heightened risk of dangerous derailments, rail workers voted to go on strike for a fair contract. And yet, in what can only be described as a sellout on steroids, both parties voted overwhelmingly in December to break the railroad workers' strike.
This is true. Both parties voted to break up the railroad workers' strike. And so, what is there left? The duopoly is all one party. That's it. That's all. And so, because they are all one party, they are unified in their front to screw you over. This is why we say to leave both parties. They will not help you in any way, shape, or form. Anyone running in those parties for the presidency in 2024 are not there to actually help you, because they are there to put you back into the same old party that kept you in this position in the first place. There is no change coming out of that system. There's none. And so to think that it will is folly. It's foolhardy, because you're asking us to not look at the evidence over the last 40 to 50 years of what they've been doing. You're asking us to not see what we saw with our eyes, to not hear what we heard with our ears. And so this is why going through the duopoly will not work.
Even the so-called progressives, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. If we are serious about turning things around, if we are serious about unionizing Amazon and workplaces across the country, we cannot just tweak the status quo. We need a reckoning. That's why we are launching Workers' Strike Back.
She said it. She said it. Now, so one of the things that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go into Workers' Strike Back. Now, if you are trying to see, as far as workers and what you can do, I'll be showing that in a second. But I think there's an important piece to talk about here. And what is it? Is the potential of what a Workers' Strike Back could mean. And Workers' Strike Back, or any other organization like it, because you don't just have to do that. Look, if you know of any other organizations that are worker-centered, that aren't trying to push you into the duopoly, but they're literally trying to just push forward the workers' movement, then cool, do that. But the potential for these different types of organizations can be massive. And what do I mean? Well, let's take a look. There you go. So I'm going to share my screen, and there's an article right now that many people really aren't paying that much attention to, or if they are, it's only because they're politically inept. So this says France braces for strikes that could bring the country to a standstill for days on end. How many times have people like us have talked about, man, we need to be more like France. France got the right idea. France is bringing their country to their knees, which is good. That's great. But the thing is that what do they have in place? A lot of them have in place organizations, right? They have more worker protections. And why do they have this? Well, it's because, guess what? They're organizing. And this is a point that we should also take a book out of what France is doing. So let's get into the article. So the strikes against bitterly contested plans to reform pensions in France continue on Tuesday, which is today. And this time, unions have upped the ante. Unlike previous walkouts, this week's industrial action has no prearranged end date. This is a very important part. Why? Because on TikTok, there was this thing that people were trying to drum up saying, oh, we're going to do a general strike and it's going to go from this state to this state. No, no, no. You do not have an end date for a general strike when you are trying to get concessions from the oligarchs. I'll say it more kindly. I was going to say something else. You do not give them an end date. That's the problem, because they will wait you out. Why is France doing it so well? Because they're like, until you give us what we want, we ain't stopping. Can't stop, won't stop. And that's how it is. And that's the way it should be. You don't give them a time for when they're going to stop. It says, with workers across multiple sectors expected to strike, life in France could grind to a halt for days on end. Starting off, it says, teachers, gas and electricity workers, train drivers, and industrial workers are all expected to join strikes that will begin on Tuesday, today, sparking national upheaval that could last for days on end. March 7th, which is today, will mark the 6th day of industrial action since January over government plans to reform pension rights in France and increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. They are literally striking over 2 years of retirement age. Yet they want to raise ours by like 4 or 5 years, and we do nothing. We do nothing. And they're doing over 2 years of retirement age. They're like, oh, hell no. No. That's what they're doing. And guess what? A lot of us are like, yeah. What are they on? Because we want to be on the same thing. Organization. Yes, they have unions, right? I think it's 89% of working people in the United States are not in a union. 89%. So for us, unions, their power is scanty. So the fact is that, yeah, we can try to do things through unions, but that's only 11% of workers. That's it, right? What needs to happen is there also needs to be organizations. So even if you're not in a union, right, you still belong to an organization that could be outside of the workplace, that you could build solidarity, build mutual aid, and so on and so forth. You feel me? You get what I'm saying? So this is why it's so important. So we literally have to sometimes organize outside of the corporation, outside of the workplace itself, and then gather all workers in order to have solidarity among each other from multiple different industries. Look at here. It says from different industries. It says teachers, gas, electricity workers, train drivers, industrial workers, all these people from different industries. You have the education industry, the energy industry. You know, you have these people from different trades, train drivers, industrial workers. So that's the point, right? Because but unlike previous strikes, major confederations of French trade unions, including the CFDT and CGT, have announced grèves reconductibles, meaning workers will vote at the end of each day on whether to continue industrial action with no fixed end date. Unions hope rolling walkouts have the potential to disrupt daily life and threaten the economy so severely that it forces the government into submission. You want the government to cry uncle. That's the thing. That's what we want. We want them to cry uncle. Why? Because, as some people may say, we run this shit. We run this. And it's time for the working people to actually realize that they do. We run this. Jeff Bezos would not be anywhere he is without us. Elon Musk would not be anywhere if it weren't for us. Bill Gates would not have a dime without us. Richard Branson wouldn't have a dime without the people in the UK and some of us. All these billionaires would not have a damn thing. The Koch brothers wouldn't have a damn thing without us. And so you have to look at all billionaires as the same. Every single one. I don't care if it's Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey. Look at them, all the same. I don't care if it's Rihanna. Sorry, Riri, she's an exploiter too. We need to turn that song back on her. Better have my money. You thought that I forgot? Yeah. Pay us back because you damn exploited us. So this is the problem that that we have in this country. Right? Okay. So let's continue because this article is just, it's giving me hyped because I love seeing stuff like this because people really need to take their power back. And this is about empowering the people. So it says, we always said that we would go into a higher gear if necessary. Philippe Martinez said. It said, it will be the case on Tuesday. So they're kicking it into higher gear today. It says representatives say striking workers are in for the long haul. And they will only be able to do this with mutual aid, by the way. This is an important piece when it comes to things like this. Mutual aid is deeply important. It continues, says, for gas and electricity workers, walkouts, which began on Friday the 3rd, will continue at the minimum until the 7th and the maximum until we win. It does not end until we win. That's the thing that we need to get into our heads. It doesn't, we do not concede until we get what we want. Okay, on Friday, energy production in France was reduced in multiple nuclear power stations, bringing down overall electricity supply. In the midst of cost of living and energy crisis, union representatives in production will fall even lower as strikes continue in order to negatively impact the French economy. And people are going to complain. Like, for instance, if we did something like this, people would complain. But that's a good thing because it means it's working, right? You may have people complain, oh man, there's no food in the stores because workers are on strike. Good. Because we're going to be okay. We may be struggling a little bit, but we'll be okay as long as we have mutual aid going on between us. But everybody else, look, okay, fine. But that means that you need to pressure the people who are in power that they need to concede and give us the power back. Or else, that's important. Let us continue. For the week ahead, Ministère predicted targeted energy cuts, blockades, sit-ins, and Robin Hood operations, adding, if Emmanuel Macron doesn't want France to come to a standstill in a dark week for the energy industry, it will be better for him to withdraw his reforms. I'm sorry, but that's some gangster shit. That's gangster. And that's how you have to be. Because these people, you cannot negotiate and try to beg people who have no conscience to have a conscience. They have none. These billionaires have no conscience. These corporatists have no conscience. These ultra millionaires, these venture capitalists, they have no morals. They have no conscience. The only way they know actually how to bend to the will of the people is by forcing their hand. By forcing their hand. You have to. And they're going to use all the apparatuses that they have in place. But the thing is that there's more of you. You're stronger. There's more of us than there are of them. These people are a tiny, tiny little group. That's all they are. They're nothing. Nothing. Walkouts, industry, transport, education. His participants on Tuesday are expected to be high, with workers across a range of sectors expected to mobilize. In the transport sector, National Rail Company, SNCF, and Ile-de-France transport provider, RATP, are both expecting major ongoing strikes, with transport authorities warning of major disruption in Paris. It says international journeys on delays, trains, and flights will also be impacted, with the French Civil Aviation Authority, which is similar to our FAA, recommending that airports in major cities across France reduce flight traffic by up to 30%. Delays and cancellations are expected. In education, 7 major teaching unions have called for total closure of schools today on March 7th. High school and university students are expected to join protests alongside staff from Tuesday, with peak of activity on March 9th with a dedicated youth mobilization day. Kids are literally walking out of school. Students are walking out of colleges. Even the kids are like, we're done with this. No. Even the kids are saying, yeah, we out. Y'all ain't gonna pay our parents, our aunties, our uncles, our grandparents. Y'all ain't gonna have them their future secured. Guess what? We're out too. We're not doing it. Isn't that amazing? This is why organizations like Workers Strike Back are so important. To get mobilizations like this, to get it going. This is why we need things like this. This is why this is absolutely necessary. This is why we're not focused on a duopoly. We're actually focused on workers. And we're actually focused on building power outside of this duopoly. Now, if somebody wants to run independent or third party, okay, that's fine. But this is where the power lies, right? All right. There's a couple other pieces that I want to get into. Says petrol and chemistry workers. So oil and chemistry workers, including the pharmaceutical sector, have been asked to strike along with France's 1.5 million metal workers. Many of them work in market-leading aeronautic, automobile, and steel industries. Can you imagine if the industries like Boeing, right? And I'm not talking about the part of their industry where they make the military, planes, but the ones where they make the commercial jets, right? The ones that make the jets for, United and for Southwest Airlines and all these other, airlines. If they stop working and stop producing for these airlines, right? Imagine if the workers at GM and Ford and Toyota and Nissan, if they all just said, you know what, we're not doing this no more. We're walking out. Imagine if they express solidarity here in the United States. So it's brought to a standstill as more workers in the Industrial Action Union hope France will be brought to a standstill on Tuesday and beyond. says 1.4 million people are expected to take part in protests, with 60 to 90,000 protesters in Paris alone. Police have said. Unions also expect the scale of upheaval to be evident in other ways. Roads could be blocked, shops shuttered, and buildings sites silent. So this is why it is so important for organizations like this, right? This is why it is absolutely necessary. So I want to show this as well. We have a video that I'm going to present. And let's take a look here. And it gives the why as to workers are striking.
Fed up and angry, transport and energy sector workers led a demonstration in Paris to call for higher wages. Among them were oil refinery staff who've been on strike for a month. The standoff with their bosses at Total Energy has caused a fuel shortage in the country. The French government's attempt to end the blockade by forcing staff back to work or face penalties has inflamed tensions.
It's terrible. Rather than doing that, they should force companies to hand over their large profits to social organizations.
Macron is like Thatcher. It's a policy of the bosses stuffing their faces while the workers are allowed crumbs, but we don't even get the crumbs.
Despite the turnout in the city, it wasn't the general strike that France's trade unions had called for. Many sectors did not take part. But for the public, some disruption. Some train and bus services were cancelled, adding to the difficulties people already face to get around.
It's been a challenging week for vehicle owners in France. Many petrol stations are still short of fuel. This pump here doesn't have any petrol left at all. And even though the government has ordered some oil refinery staff back to the job, the situation still hasn't improved that much.
Imagine workers going on strike, and then imagine workers going on strike, and then scabs don't have enough, no gas to get in order to get to the job, in order to interfere with the strike. Imagine if scabs can't even get to the job. Imagine if the buses stop working and the scabs can't jump on the bus to get to where they need to go in order to undercut the picket line. Imagine that. Imagine even if you have people that tried to go to work at the grocery store, nobody delivered food from the companies to the grocery store because the drivers stopped working and went on strike. So they can't even sell food at the restaurant because there's no food there really to sell, or they sold out all their food. And so now they have nothing left to sell, so they have to close down. They have to shut down. See, things like this not only influence workers to strike, but it also forces other workers who would potentially cross the picket line that they can't even work either. Imagine that. Just a thought.
I work for a car rental agency. It's been hard for us to refuel our vehicles. We have to spend a full day waiting to refill our tanks.
It's really hard at the moment. I've spent nearly 5 days looking for petrol, and it's tough because I need my car for work.
Inflation's fueling discontent in France, but this political scientist says that the sort of unrest seen in the country during the Yellow Vest movement is unlikely.
It's unlikely that we will see a large social movement emerge that would unite all workers, because people all have different concerns, particularly among the working class. So it's hard for everyone to come together.
The French president has urged an end to the refinery blockade, and opinion polls suggest a majority of French people now want the same. But these protesters say they won't give up their fight until their demands are met. Natasha Butler, Al Jazeera, Paris.
All right. I want to hear from that oligarch, Kevin O'Leary. But yeah, so that is the implication that could happen with organizations like Workers Strike Back. This is why they are so important. And this is why people like me, people like Savvy, I know CJ spoke about Workers Strike Back. This is why it is as important as it is. And people really need to take stock into how deeply important it is, because it is effective. Its importance is why it's so effective. Shout out to SLC Socialist. Shared a video of the protests in France. So let's just see this really quick. This is why it's important. This is why. Because then you have all these people that aren't working because they're sick and tired of the BS from this corporate dictatorship. In order to really succeed, you have to overthrow the corporate dictatorship. And that's what vehicles and like these organizations such as Workers Strike Back can be a great tool in order to overthrow this corporate dictatorship that is literally ruining our lives. Aren't you tired of being under the dictatorship? It's funny because a lot of people hate their jobs, hate their bosses, think that the government is bought, and yet we don't do anything. We hate our jobs. We hate our bosses. And we see that the government is bought and paid for by these corporations, and yet we don't do anything. Come on, man. That's why this is important. Now, let's go. Goodness gracious. Okay. It wouldn't shrink. Now, let's go to the Workers Strike Back website so that you guys can know what's coming up. Some of you may have seen it already. Where is it? All right. So I also have the link to Workers Strike Back website in the description. But here it is. And it says, we are an independent movement organizing in our workplaces and on the streets against the bosses and their political servants. That's basically what it is, right? If you go to the About section, it says Workers Strike Back is an independent rank and file campaign organizing in our workplaces and on the streets against the bosses and their political servants. says workers are falling further and further behind while billionaires and big businesses hoard the wealth that we create. Workers Strike Back is launched by Socialist Seattle Council member Kshama Sawant, Socialist Alternative, and others who want to build a national movement to fight back. We take our inspiration from the hundreds of thousands of workers fighting to unionize at Amazon, Starbucks, and workplaces everywhere. The movement to defend abortion rights in the U.S., the Enough is Enough working class campaign in the UK, and the ongoing struggles of workers and young people to stop climate catastrophe and fight for a different kind of society. We need to learn from past victories and defeats and develop an organization and strategy needed to win. Now, what is their demands? It says demand number one, workers need a real raise. And a real raise meaning something that is able to help us thrive, a living wage. Number two, good union jobs for all. Number three, fight racism, sexism, and all oppression. This is very important because when you have these different types of racist or sexist or homophobic or transphobic type of lingo or thoughts or takes, you're literally doing the job of the oppressor in order to divide the working people so that they don't go against the oppressor. You're doing the dirty work of the person that's actually screwing you over. When you talk about, oh man, these people are drag queens, they're hurting our children, which isn't true, then you're literally doing the job of the oppressor. When you're saying that, oh, these people who are, they're coming in and taking our jobs from these other countries, you're literally doing the job of the oppressor. That's exactly what you're doing. And that's why this is so important, right? Let's continue. Thanks, Nick. Good to see you, Nick. Nick's in the chat. So, says number four, quality, affordable housing and free healthcare for all. Housing is a right, and so therefore it does not make any sense in this country, especially when you have companies like Vanguard and BlackRock that are buying up all the homes and making us into a nation of renters. That doesn't make any sense. Over 500,000 people who sleep out in the streets every single night and over 16 million vacant homes in this country. You mean to tell me that we can't house everybody? There's literally 30 houses to every single unhoused person in this nation. It's not an issue of scarcity. That is a myth. It is an issue of giving people what they deserve, what they are entitled to, housing. You are worthy of being housed. That's important. That's another demand. And then the final one says, no more sellouts, we need a new party. This is also deeply important because how in the hell are you going to cape for the duopoly knowing that they work in tandem, in league with the Republican Party? It doesn't make sense. There is no party. That means that if both parties are together, that means that there really is no party. It's just corporate dictatorship. That's it. There is no Republican and Democratic parties. There is no spoon. They don't exist. Meaning that it's all just corporations that rule over you. So when we talk about actually having a new party or actually having third parties or independents, we're actually talking about really establishing a party in general that is counter to what the corporations, the oligarchs actually want. That's what it really is. Now, events. This weekend, on the 11th, Savvy will be there at the Boston Workers Strike Back launch rally. So if you guys are near the Boston area, then you guys have someplace to go this weekend. The Boston Workers Strike Back launch rally. Also, Chicago, shout out to Heartlands Media, friends to the JB channel. Chicago Workers Strike Back launch rally. They will also be this Saturday. So make sure to get your booty out there in order to start to stand with workers and to launch this rally. Madison, Wisconsin. If you're out there in the Madison, Wisconsin area, then you guys are deeply important. Get your booty out there. And then they're talking about organizing your workplace out in Pittsburgh on Saturday, April 8th. I signed a petition. Did you? I want them to come out here in Orlando. I would love for them to come out here to Orlando, Florida. And if you guys are out here locally, shoot, say what's up. But this is also deeply important, right? Even though technically I'm not in the traditional workforce anymore, right? Because I'm disabled, I still would go because I want to express my solidarity. Because even with every strike, with every single fight against these corporate dictators, they're also fighting for us. Those of you who are disabled, who don't have a job, a traditional job, guess what? When these workers strike and they do things like what they're doing in France, they're also doing it for you too. Express your solidarity. And then also, if you can help out with some mutual aid, then do it. I don't care if you make six figures. You're still a worker. If you're working for a wage, you're still a worker. You need to express solidarity. I don't care if you're PMC, because this will benefit you as well. That's the point. So, there's an organization you can join. There's an organization you can partner with. And if you also know of any mutual aid organizations, talk to them and see if they can actually express solidarity with Workers Strike Back in your area. So then you have a mutual aid organization. You also have a workers' strike organization. Boom. Let's get this going, man. People are suffering. Your brothers and sisters out there and your family out there, they're suffering. Let's get it going.